Everybody, I'm Logan Crawford, and this is the award-winning TV talk show right here on Ebru Fresh Outlook. 2015 is now in our rear-view mirror, but sometimes the earth-shattering events from last year will reverberate in the new year and beyond. Europe experienced a migration crisis that could wind up unprecedented because it is still going on. The U.S. political scene was upended by an outsider who has been dismissed wrongly time and time again as somebody who will fade. And America was struck by the worst terror attack since 9/11. Let's say hello to our Fresh Outlook guests today. I'm joined by Bill Rosenberg, a professor of political science at Drexel University, Jackie Guzda, media professor at Western Connecticut State University, Jim McCarthy, a financial expert from Directional Wealth Management, and joining us live via Skype is Lance Simmens, author of the book Fractured. Bill, I'm going to start with you because I think politics in 2015 was huge. What do you say the biggest story of 2015 was?
Well, I think there were several stories, and I think several of them are all interrelated. So it's kind of hard to pick just one, two, or three. But I would say ISIS, definitely a dominating influence. And related to that is the whole Syrian and Middle Eastern crisis with regards to refugees, because one caused the other, but they're two separate problems. And then the third one is really the activities going on with our presidential election. They call this in politics the invisible primary because we haven't actually had a primary yet, but it's anything but invisible. I mean, we have Donald Trump, making news every day and other candidates trying to respond to him. So I think it's a very active year, and I think that the world really has to take a look at how it's going to handle these situations.
Okay, I'm going to come back in just a bit. I'm going to go around to everybody first. Jackie, what would you say the 1, 2, or 3 top stories of 2015 are or were?
All of the above, but I think that what we've got to do in this country, as you said, take a look at how we're reacting to these situations, is that they're kind of playing off each other. We're living in this climate of fear. All of a sudden, we have this boogeyman coming out of nowhere. No state actor. It's not Russia, it's not China, it's ISIS. And they're just taking over lands, and they don't care who they hit as long as they push their ideology. Well, they just play right into their hands of a Ted Cruz or a Donald Trump, because those two candidates and the others are now saying, I can protect you from all these evil things. So in a sense, ISIS is helping them. But I think how we should react is that we should not fall prey to that.
Okay, I'm going to follow up on that in just a second. Let me get to Jim. Your big stories of 2015.
Well, being the financial guy on the panel, I'll sort of focus on the financial world. Obviously, what's the impact of the declining price in oil? There seems to be a supply-demand imbalance, and some political issues going on with Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries sort of artificially keeping production up, even though they would rather the production go down, so the price would go up, trying to push U.S. Manufacturers out of the market. Number two was probably the Federal Reserve starting to raise interest rates for the first time in 7 years. I think that's somewhat of an indication that the U.S. economy is probably doing okay, but there's a lot of divergence going on because you still got Europe and Asia with their economies suffering and a lot of decreasing interest rates over there, so there's sort of a split there. And then for me, in the United States, another big thing that impacts, I think, people domestically is the approval of same-sex marriage across the country.
Okay, I'm going to follow up on all of that in just a moment. Let's turn to Lance Simmens, author of the book Fractured. Lance, what are your top stories from 2015?
Well, I certainly agree with the other commentators there about ISIS and the presidential election. But for me, the biggest issue of 2015 is what is unfortunately becoming commonplace, another hottest year on record. So from a climate standpoint, we are continuing to spiral into unknown territory towards a climate crisis. And unless we seriously get a hold of this issue, it is going to impact every other issue on the planet. And unfortunately, I think that the accords which were reached in Paris all sound very good, but they really are not enforceable, and they don't get us to the point where we need to take this issue seriously. So I think that climate change continues to be the most serious issue facing the planet.
Okay, and we're going to rejoin you in just a second, Lance. I'm going to turn to Bill, whom I joined first. ISIS, it seems to be the consensus, was a dominating force in 2015. It's a driving force in the political election, like Jackie pointed out. What can be done?
Well, first of all, there are different strategies about what should be done. We're going to go in there, we're going to have boots on the ground, and we're really going to take over that land, and we're going to sort of repeat Iraq 1 and 2 again. And it doesn't look like the American public has a lot of appetite to do this. But the reason why Jackie's point was so good was that it really brought up this idea about fear. If you take a look, if you go back to 2008, what did Obama campaign on? Hope, okay? When you take a look at the candidates that are out there, probably the most hopeful one is Donald Trump, okay? You know, he's talking about making America great again. He's using lines which fit sort of Obama and sort of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I was gonna say Reagan.
But the point is that he's going about it with messaging that also is very much sort of condescending to different groups. It's aggressive to other nations. And as a result, he's not building an environment that's really going to have people wanting to work together. So if he was to get elected, which I will be one of those that dismiss him, I will dismiss him probably also in terms of getting the nomination also. What would we have? We would have Donald Trump versus the Congress. Well, he's got no experience in Congress. He's got no experience in passing laws. He has no ability really to work with people. He's all about making a deal. So if you take a look and you project that to ISIS, what's he going to do with ISIS? Is he going to go and try and sign a new contract to build apartments there? No, he doesn't have that experience. He didn't know what the nuclear trident was. So it's kind of like we have a situation where political scientists have been talking about it for a number of years about why great men don't become president. And if you take a look at the field, you could be hard-pressed to really determine hardly any of the candidates that really have who meet the muster of what we might ideally like to have in a president. And that's a problem for voters.
Turn to Jackie for just a second. Han Solo needs Darth Vader. Reagan needed Gorbachev. Every good guy needs a bad guy. Every country needs an enemy. That's just part of the politics. That's just part of the world. If you don't have an enemy, you create one. So isn't ISIS the perfect enemy for a Donald Trump or a Ted Cruz or Hillary Clinton if she decides to get tough?
Well, the problem with that is that, yeah, it creates the bad guy. Now we have somebody that...
But they really are bad. They're beheading people. They're raping
terrible.
people. They're destroying nations.
They're terrible. But what's going on is that Trump and his friends are equating all Muslims with ISIS because they are Islamo-fascists, as they put it. So people in this country who need somebody to hate, to be against, are now saying it's all Muslims. There was a woman last night at a Trump rally who just stood up in a hijab, and it wasn't so much the reaction at first, is when they led her out, it was disgusting. People were like, "Bah, bah," like that. So you're right, what's happening is that Trump, Cruz, Marco Rubio, I heard this from too, are now dividing this country. And that is not good for us. We've got to come together if we're going to defeat somebody like an ISIS.
And a lot of people, however, would say that President Obama has been one of the most divisive presidents in the history of the United States.
I think that was you.
That probably was me.
Wasn't me.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has pitted the racial barrier. I think he's created a divide rather than bridging a divide. But we could debate that another time. I'm going to turn to Jim. Jim, you mentioned that the interest rate hike was a big thing. To what did it go up, 1/4%, 0.5%?
Yeah, it was more about the fact that they did it. It was 1/4 point, and that is the point, Logan, is that it was not a material change in interest rates. Interest rates are still at historic lows. If you look at a 80-year chart of the U.S. 10-year Treasury, I mean, we obviously had the 80s when it went like to 18% and crazy, but since then we've been historically low. I think a normalized rate should be somewhere in the 3 to 4% range. We're at 1/4 point. I mean,
Right.
We're still at virtually zero. So, but I think what it was more than anything else was an indication that the U.S. economy is on firm enough footing to withstand some of this external stuff that's going on around the world.
Or so we hope. The first 4 days of trading on the New York Stock Exchange were abysmal.
I had a hell of a week.
Yeah.
It was, but there again, it was more about the noise and the fear. And the one thing the stock market likes least of all is uncertainty.
Absolutely.
They can live with bad data or bad trends, but the uncertainty is what really gives the market fits, and that's what happened.
Let's turn to Lance joining us from Skype. Lance, tell me a little bit about climate change. A lot of people don't seem worked up about it. It's interesting that you say that it is the biggest threat to humanity. Bernie Sanders says that, so some people in high places do agree with you. But I think it's the short-sightedness of people that they're not concerned. It's not going to affect them severely in their lifetimes, or so they think, correct?
Well, it's more than some people agree with me. It's about 99% of the scientific community agrees that we are heading towards a point of no return. And that point of no return is going to be here relatively quickly. We are merrily plodding along with an economic paradigm internationally that is based on fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are a thing of the past. My book, Fractured, which will be out in March, I talk about the need not to reduce our dependence upon foreign oil, but our need to reduce our dependence upon fossil fuels. And until we get to the point where we're willing to shift both the political and the economic paradigm away from one which is dominated by fossil fuels, we are going to run into problems like we have never witnessed, like the human race has never witnessed. But I would like to go back, Logan, just for 1 second, on something that was being discussed by the panel. On the political side of things, I think Donald Trump represents anything but hope. I think that it's just another call, a clarion call, to return to a point in this country that probably never existed. And that is based on fear, and he's playing to fear. And I don't see on the Republican side of things, I don't see one thing that even remotely smacks of hope. So we've got to get a hold of this climate issue, and we've got to get a hold of it very quickly because time is just passing us by.
Okay, Lance. Bill, I know you meant hope in a perverse way, meaning that we have hope of becoming great again.
Right. I think the point is
a reactionary type of hope.
Well, also, I think the point is for those people that support him, they have a vision of hope. It may not be what most of America wants as a vision of hope, but they're at least galvanized around an idea, and he uses it as sort of a positive metaphor of, look, we can be great again, we can lead the world, we can be happy. And what happens is that happiness sort of fails to recognize realities of life, okay? It fails to recognize poverty, it fails to recognize conflict, it fails to recognize global warming, okay? Even the comment that was made, and I'm not sure who made it, about whether or not global warming is for real. Well, scientists don't debate it at all. There's a few people that I'm going to suggest are on the shoddy side of science and on a perverse side of politics that raise questions about it. They don't say it's wrong. They say, well, we don't know enough. So what happens is a lot of these issues, and this is where I started the conversation today, is about the fact that these are not isolated issues. ISIS, the campaign, global warming, the stock market, all of these issues are all together, and the problem that voters have is they have to choose one person to be president. There's 16 original Republicans running. There were 3 Democrats, and if you actually go and look, there's about 50 other people running that you don't even know their names on. Only one of these people is going to be president of the United States. And we're not going to like everything that the eventual nominee is for. No one's going to. But we have to settle on someone, and that's what the challenge is.
And we will. And one of the people that most Americans, at least according to polls, are settling on is Hillary Clinton, which to a lot of people might represent a lot of hope in that she's the first viable female candidate from a major party who's a front runner in all of this. So as a woman, does she give you hope?
Well, of course I want to see a woman in office. I've been
But
waiting
just
for
not
this.
her.
That's not true.
Okay, putting words in your mouth.
Let's speak the truth here.
Okay.
All right, no, but I think that what's going to happen in this election is that it's going to be pretty clear cut. You're going to have the right side that is going to say, global warming, maybe not, probably not. They're going to be saying, everything's just fine the way it is. We've got, they're on the right. Then you've got the left who, according to a lot of surveys, are people from a higher educational level. Hate to say that because that's dividing the country. However, people who see the complicated parts of everything that you were talking about are now going to go over towards Hillary Clinton, whether they like everything that she represents or not. I don't like everything Hillary represents.
Right.
However, when it comes to ideology and what path we're going to take in this country from now on, I am so far over to the left. Everybody who's running on the right, not one person.
But what's interesting though is that if you look at the matchups, Hillary versus the top 3 Republicans, she loses in head-to-head matchups.
Really?
That's a poll.
No,
Depends on the poll.
That's a poll.
Well,
too.
it is a poll, but that's the only thing that we have right now.
No.
Okay, we will settle all of this by looking into our crystal ball another day and figure out what's going to happen in 2016 and beyond. When we come back, however, we're going to take a look at what's happening in China and how it's affecting the rest of the world. More on that